Okay, this is revision for BTEC Sport Unit 1 Fitness Testing and Training. If you're watching this obviously on YouTube, then there's not going to be much pictures on the screen. It is audio. There might be a virtual badge up there and nothing else, so there's not really anything to look at. It's more of a listening one. This is audio. Okay, so first of all, we're going to deal with the components of fitness, and the first thing to say is that there are two sides to components of fitness. There's components of physical fitness, and there is components of skill-related fitness. And obviously, you need to know each, the definition of each, and a test for each. So we'll start with skill-related fitness, remembered by the acronym BPCAR. If you remember, if you've done that in lessons. If we start with the B is for balance, which is the ability to maintain centre of mass over a base of support. The ability to maintain centre of mass over a base of support. Remember, there's two types of balance. Static, which is still, which would be things like handstands or crucifix in gymnastics. Or there's dynamic, which is balance on the move, which might be somebody running, changing direction in football, showing good balance, or maybe a cartwheel in gymnastics. The tests for balance, which you all should know, you need to know the tests, is a standing stalk test, which the one leg, hands on hips, up on your toes. Okay, the P in BP cars, which is skill related fitness, is power, which is the ability to combine strength and speed, which you can get in the exam for just writing strength times speed. So lots of athletes would need power. Remember, it is a combination of strength and speed. So it would be, maybe you imagine a rugby player trying to break a tackle. If it's from a standing start, it's far easier to stop them. If they're already running at you with speed and the strength that they have, it's much harder to stop them. A boxer throwing a punch would need strength and speed. Even a footballer hitting a shot would need strength and speed. So they are all examples of power. The test for power, there's two. So there is what you might call a standing long jump, which we call a standing broad jump. And then there's a vertical jump test, which we would call a sergeant jump. Okay, the C in skill-related fitness is coordination. Coordination is the ability to move two or more body parts smoothly and accurately. And again, think of activities that have lots of different body parts work at the same time. Things like a tennis serve or a golf swing would have lots of different body parts moving in different directions to perform the task. The test for coordination, which you've also done, would be the alternate hand wall catch, which is where you throw the ball against the wall as many times as you can in 30 seconds and catch it. Okay, on to the next component, which is agility, which is the ability to change direction at speed. The ability to change direction at speed. So again, think of players sidestepping in maybe rugby, going round a player, similarly in hockey, or basketball, going round the player, changing direction at speed. Football, similarly. The test for agility, probably a simple one, you should remember this, is the Illinois agility test. Okay, the final component in skill-related fitness is reaction time, which is the time taken to respond to a stimulus, the time taken to respond to a stimulus. So, obvious examples of this will be at the start of races, swimming races, 100-meter races, 200-meter races, etc. The gun goes off, then the performer must move and respond to that stimulus. So the gun is the stimulus, their movement is the response. The test for reaction time would be the ruler drop test, which I think you've all done a number of times. So they are the skill-related components. That's BP cars. On to now the physical-related components. There are 6 of these, which remember with the rhyme, Big Fat Maureen munches cake speedily, using the first letter of each of those words. So the B is for body composition, which is the relative amounts of muscle, bone and fat in the body. The relative amounts of muscle, bone and fat in the body. Obviously different sports require different body compositions. So a sumo wrestler would have a very different body composition to a jockey or a high jumper, etc. So you can think of lots of different sports that have different body types. The test for body composition, there are 3. We'll talk a bit more about this later. You've got BMI, body mass index. You've got the Jackson-Pollock nomogram method. And you have BIA, which is bioelectrical impedance analysis. And you should be able to say which is the best of those and why. Okay, the F in physical fitness components is flexibility, the ability to move the joint around a large range of movement. The ability to move the joint around a large range of movements. And again, think of obvious examples of flexibility, things like gymnasts or dancers or ice skaters getting their bodies into particularly difficult positions, but you'll also see it from goalkeepers and in a variety of other sports. The test for flexibility is the sit and reach test, which again you've all done in lessons, where you push the counter up and see how far you can stretch. Remember, that only really tests lower back, upper back, and possibly hamstrings, but it is the recognised test for flexibility. The first M is for muscular strength. Muscular strength is the maximum force that can be generated in one contraction, or what you might call one rep max. So think of activities that require one massive show of strength. So you might get, obviously, a weightlifter is a fairly obvious one repetition. How heavy can they lift a weight? Things like javelin, shot put would all show muscular strength, but obviously you'll see other things again, like a shot in football. How hard can you hit the ball if you're going for power? The test for muscular strength is the hand grip dynamometer. Remember, if you asked a question about that you must reset the dynamometer after every attempt, which is called recalibrating the equipment, resetting it to 0. The next component of fitness in physical is muscular endurance. So that is the ability of muscles to repeat and maintain contractions over a long time without getting tired. So again, think of people that do sports where they need to repeat contractions over and over again. So you might have footballers in that are running over and over again, or striking a ball over and over again. You might have long distance runners whose legs have got to repeat muscular contractions over and over again. You might have long distance swimmers who have got to repeat arm and leg movements over and over again, repeating the contraction continuously. The test for muscular endurance would be a 1 minute sit-up test or a 1 minute press-up test. The next component of fitness is cardiovascular fitness, which you might also call aerobic endurance. This is the ability to work the whole body using oxygen in the cardiorespiratory system for long periods of time. So basically the ability for the body to deliver oxygen to the working muscles to keep you aerobic for as long as possible. And again, examples would be fairly obvious of this. You're looking at people that would do distance and need oxygen over a long period of time. Long distance runners, long distance swimmers, Tour de France cyclists, anyone that needs oxygen supplied to the muscles over a long period of time. The test for aerobic endurance stroke cardiovascular fitness would be 2. There's the forestry step test, and there's the multi-stage fitness test. You would call that the bleep test, but again, in the example, please try and use the term multi-stage fitness test. Okay, the final component of physical fitness is speed, which is the time taken to cover a given distance. Fairly obvious, this one. So anyone who needs speed, the obvious example is obviously a 100-metre sprinter, but it doesn't have to just be on land, it could be in the water. So a short distance swimming, 50 or 100 metres, would need speed, but also you get like a rugby winger or a hockey winger who has to break with the ball, who would need speed to outpace the fullback. So there's lots of examples of speed. The test for speed is the 30-metre sprint test, and you should know all of those by now. Okay, the second topic we'll look at is going to be about principles of training. And again, the minute you see or hear principles of training, you should be thinking of the acronym SPORIVAR. So a principle is the reasons why we train, the fundamentals behind why we've decided to train as we have. So you should be thinking SPORIVAR. So we'll deal with each letter. So we'll start with the S, which is specificity, which is making training specific to your sport or your muscle group. So making your training specific to the sport you're going to play. So you could be the fittest person in the world and you're playing tennis, but if you don't actually practice tennis, that's not going to make you a particularly effective player. So making your training specific to your sport and muscle group. The P and the O from SPORIVAR are progressive overload. Please make sure you use the word gradual or gradually if you're answering a question about progressive overload. Gradually increasing the amount of training you do to ensure a development of fitness. So gradually increasing the amount of training you do to ensure a development in the level of fitness. We'll talk a bit more about how the FIT principle is linked to that in a minute, but if you are talking progressive overload, you are talking about the FIT principle as well. The R from SPORIVAR is reversibility, which simply means if you stop training, your level of fitness will go into reverse. Basically, you will lose fitness. This normally happens either at the end of a season when you stop training or because you are injured, and basically means you will lose fitness if you stop training. The I from Sporivar is individual needs or individual differences. You can get it for either of those terms, which is making sure the training matches the goals of the individual, not the sport, the individual. So this would take into account things like gender and age and any past injuries and medication and what level of fitness you currently have. So making sure your training is tailored to the individual athlete. And we've said this before, if you had two different people, you would train them in different ways depending on their individual needs. The V from Sporivar is variation, which is using a variety of training methods to ensure you don't get bored and stop training. If you are going to answer a question on this, which tends to be a longer question, please make sure you discuss what type of variation you do. So if you're a long distance runner and you normally do continuous training, you might change that to interval training. That might give you a good sprint finish if you did a little bit of sprint work at the end, or you do some hollow sprints or acceleration sprints. So say how it would help you. But it's basically changing the method so you don't get bored. The A from Sporivar is adaptation. So adaptation is allowing the body to adapt to the stress of training and therefore allowing it to gain fitness. To do that, you need to allow rest and recovery. If you don't allow rest and recovery, your body won't adapt and it can cause injuries. So basically, I train over a number of sessions maybe. I then rest to allow my body to get the benefits of it and adapt, and then I can progressively overload my training. The final principle in Sporivar is rest and recovery. So this is allowing the body time after training to recover and therefore allow adaptation to take place. What I would say about this is that rest is the amount of time I decide not to train for, whereas recovery is the time my body wants to actually not train, to actually recover and get back to normal. Okay, so that is the Sporivar, the main principles. Off the back of that, we have the FIT principle, which you will know, and you should remember from the song, frequency, intensity, time, and type. FIT principle is specifically related to progressive overload. If I want to gradually make my training harder, I must use one of the FIT elements of the FIT principle. So I either F, increase frequency, so how often I train. So instead of training 3 times a week, I might train 5 times a week. I could increase the intensity, which would mean I train harder, which could be anything like heavier weights, or it could be doing longer distance in the same time, but making it more intense and difficult. I could change T, which is time. So I could train for 40 minutes instead of 30 minutes. Be careful with that. Don't just say train for an hour instead of 30 minutes, because that's not gradual, so it wouldn't show progressive overload. You have to go up in stages. So if you're training for 30 minutes, you might go 40, then 50, then 60 as you got gradually fitter. And finally, the type, which would link to variation. I could change the method to get progress and gain. So it might be that I'm training, doing a lot of fartlek training, and I all of a sudden switch to circuit training or weight training to get some fitness gains that way. So FIT principle is directly related to progressive overload, and they are the principles of training. Okay, the next session, we've looked at principles of training. We're now going to look at methods of training. So principles is why we train, the reasons behind what we do, and now we're looking at methods, which is then how we actually do it. Now, there are 4 different categories of training methods. So there are aerobic endurance training methods, there are speed training methods, there are strength training methods, and there are flexibility training methods. The first thing is you need to know which section each training method goes in. So I'll say that again. There are aerobic endurance training methods, there are speed training methods, there are strength training methods, and there are flexibility training methods. So if I deal with them one at a time, if we start with aerobic endurance, so you know what aerobic endurance is from the previous section, ability to use oxygen for long periods of time in the body. So we start with continuous training. This will be even pace, which means the same speed, activity without change of intensity over a longer period of time, normally over 20 to 30 minutes. So again, who would do continuous training? Lots of athletes would, to show variation, but obvious ones will be long distance runners, long distance cyclists, long distance swimmers, anyone that goes at the same pace all the way through their event. Triathletes might. They would still do other training methods, but they would do mainly continuous. The next aerobic endurance method, there's 4 of these by the way, is fartlek, which is continuous work with changes of speed or intensity. Now remember, when you're doing this, there's lots of ways to change speed or intensity. I could run fast and slow, or swim fast and slow, etc. But I could also go uphill, downhill, so harder, easier. I could also change terrain, so I could be running on concrete and then I run on sand, which would be much harder. So it's continuous work, so no breaks, but then I change the speed or intensity. People who'd use that would be mainly gaming games players who have in their sport where the speed or intensity changes. So if you imagine a hockey player or a netball player where there's fast bits and slow bits, but they should constantly be on the move, they would use a lot of fartlek training. The third aerobic endurance training method is interval, which is high intensity work followed by a period of rest. The word interval means rest. So these are people who would maybe show a burst of high intensity energy and then get a rest. So somebody like a 100-meter sprinter, a long jumper, a triple jumper would need speed and high intensity work quite quickly, but their events wouldn't last very long. Remember, you must have rest in interval training. And the fourth type of aerobic endurance training method is circuit training. So circuit training is a series of stations that will help you develop skill or fitness. You can set up a circuit training session, do anything you want. So it could develop shorter distances, it could develop long distances or speeds. You can do anything you want at the stations, but remember there are skill related circuits, which will all be skills from a particular sport showing specificity, or there are fitness related ones which might develop muscular endurance or muscular strength or aerobic endurance. So they are the four aerobic endurance methods: continuous, fartlek, interval, circuit. The next methods are all based around speed. So we have interval training. Again, interval can go in both sections. So again, high intensity work followed by periods of rest, but again, it's up to me how long I do interval for, but it would certainly help me develop speed. Normally, because it's so intense, if it was running, for instance, you'd go as fast as you can, walk back, and then you'd have a rest, but you could do that on a bike or in the pool or whatever else. So interval training goes in both aerobic endurance and speed. The next speed training method is hollow sprints. So this is a period of work followed by a hollow period, which is normally a rest period, where you're not going to actually do nothing, but it's a lower intensity period. So you'd normally do things like sprint and then light jog, then sprint and then light jog. Not, again, used by lots of different sportsmen who need the speed and then maybe a slow down. So can you imagine a rugby player who gets the ball, bursts and then slows it down again, and then bursts and slows it down again. But again, sprinters may use it as well, or 400-meter runners. So it's periods of work followed by a hollow period, which is a downtime, if you like. You're still doing something, but it's not going to be as hard work. And the third speed method is acceleration sprints, and this would be getting faster and faster at every point. So you might start at a jog, move it to a run, move it to a bit of a quicker run, then eventually gradually get up to full speed. So again, so we get faster and faster, and you normally put a cone out, and each time you pass a cone you get faster each time. And again, this might be hockey players, football players, rugby players who have to increase the pace as they go, get faster and faster and faster. So there are three speed training methods, and they are interval training, hollow sprints and acceleration sprints. Remember, if it's 100% from the word go, we saw this in one of the past papers of the day, there is something called pure speed, which is where you just go as fast as you can for as long as you can. So that is called pure speed. We've only ever seen one question on that, but I thought it was worth mentioning in case it came up. Okay, the third set of training methods are those for strength, and again there are three for strength. So the first one is free weights or weights. So this can develop either muscular endurance or muscular strength. If you want to develop muscular strength, you would do high weight and low rep. If you want to develop muscular endurance, you would do low weight and high reps. And again, it's fairly obvious who would use it. Weightlifters would be an obvious one, but lots of athletes would use this for general fitness. But if you want the muscle size and strength, you go for high weight, low rep. And if you want endurance, low weight, high rep. Second training method for strength is plyometrics, which is bouncing, rebounding movements to gain explosive power. So I think I showed you a video of Anthony Joshua doing this, where you jump off a box, and as you land, you then push straight back up to gain explosive power, and it increases power right across the range of movement. So this is plyometrics. It's jumping, rebounding, hopping, things like that. So you really, examples of this, people who would do this would be people who would need that type of skill in sport. So you imagine basketball players who are trying to lay up or slam, or maybe rebound, hurdlers who are jumping every time, high jumpers, people who need that explosive power in a jump. Boxers use it so they can jump into punches sometimes, but again, it's a very good strength training method. And the third type of strength training method is circuit training. That's also been in another category, but circuit training, again, if you set it up right, can develop strength as well, depending on the stations you use. And then most athletes would use that and make it specific to their individual needs or their sport. So three strength training methods. They are free weights, plyometrics, and circuit training. The final methods of training are all about flexibility. I would hope you would know these by now. There are four flexibility training methods. The first one is called static passive. That is where you stretch with the help of an object or a person. So if you lean on a wall or you hold someone's shoulder and you do a stretch, but remember, static means it's a still stretch, you're not moving. Again, most athletes would use these, and there's no real examples of these. Most athletes would use all of them. So that's static passive, stretching with the help of an object or a person. The next one, flexibility, is static active. So this is where you would do a still stretch with without the support of any object or person. So a lot of stretches would be like this: a static stretch, not moving, no help of an object or a person. The third flexibility training method is ballistic. So this one's from Mackenzie, for those of you who remember that. This is where you do fast jerking movements to stretch muscles and loosen joints at the same time. So you'd normally do this after a pulse raiser, you're a little bit warmer, and maybe after some static active or static passive, you'd do some ballistic stretching to get muscles and stretch and loosen joints, quick jerking movements to loosen the body. And the final flexibility method is called PNF, which is proprioceptive neuromuscular facilitation. In the exam, you can just write PNF, and this is where you use resistance to gradually stretch your muscle further and further. I think we did a demonstration of this in class. So you hold, if you use a leg, for example, we hold someone's leg, they push against you with resistance, and then you gradually move the leg further back, and gradually you will increase the range of movement by stretching the muscles out. So that's PNF. So there are 4 flexibility training methods, and they are static passive, static active, ballistic, and PNF.